What's up, everybody? This is your captain speaking, Tom Sanders of Heretics show, coming at you live from Oxford. This is just a quick introduction to today's episode. Today's episode, entitled Burmese Daze, is focused on Myanmar and Burma and what is going on there at the moment. My guest today is Sett, Hein, who is a Burmese gentleman of my acquaintance, and today we talk about a little bit about the history of Burma, about the current situation, what the hell is going on over there, and what we think the outcomes might be. Now, the first thing to mention is that neither of us are experts in this more than the next guy. I lived there for a while. He is Burmese. He has, knows some contacts and knows his way around the country. But with that said, please take everything we say with a grain of salt. We're not journalists. We're not experts. We're just doing this out of a desire to spread the word and let people know about what's going on. With that in mind, today's episode is split down the middle into two parts. The first part one, is focused on the history of Burma and Myanmar over the last 100 years. A bit about British colonialism, a bit about the legacy of that, some of the horrible stuff that the people of Myanmar have gone through, and how it's led to today's situation with the military junta and the horrific scenes that we're seeing today in the streets. The second part of the episode is focused on everything that's happened since that fateful day on February the 1st when the military seized power. Some of the atrocities, some of the events, and our prognosis for what might come out of this, and a few things that we'd like to say surrounding what's going on and maybe what people can do to try and improve the current situation, which really is, I think it's fair to say, pretty dire. So with that in mind, please treat the episode in two parts. Feel free to skip part one if you feel well acquainted with Burmese history, or if you just listen to one, maybe part two is the one to go for. The music we'll be using today comes from some Burmese punk artists in Myanmar, Culture Shock, Rebel Riot, and a few other dudes playing with them. You can find a link to the song in the bio, or at least the lyrics to the song, and we'll try and get a link out as soon as possible. You'll also find a link to Sett's art, to the meme page that he talks about in part two. And as always, you can find us on YouTube, Instagram, and all these other channels, and you can email me at thehereticspodcast.com, thehereticspodcast@gmail.com. It's a bit of a rough one. We try and keep it light, we try and keep it fun, we do our best, but this is heavy stuff. And the last thing I'll say is, guys, if you do share an episode, make it this one, please. There's actually a reason behind this one, and something a bit bigger than me and my little show. So please do share this to people who maybe are interested and sympathetic to what's happening in Myanmar, but maybe don't really understand just how we got to this situation, what the hell is going on, and what the possible routes out of this current situation are. So without any further ado, thank you so much to Sett for his appearance. Thank you to Kara for helping me with the editing. Thank you to everyone who's contributed to make the Heretics show a real thing that people can listen to on the internet. That's it from me, everybody. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Part two will be coming soon. Much love. Stay safe out there. Yeah, that's it from me. All right, enjoy. What's up, everybody? How's it going? Welcome once again to the Heretics show with me, your host, Tom Sanders. Today's episode is it is infitting for the show, but it's maybe a little bit different to some of the stuff we've done before. We are focusing today on something that is quite close to my heart from my own personal experience, and also for my guest today, something a bit more heavy than maybe stuff we've looked at in the past. What we hope today's episode will do is give you some perspective about something that you may or may not know a lot about, that being the situation in Myanmar at the moment, and maybe kind of help you to get an idea of what's going on behind the scenes at the moment, and maybe some ideas about what people could do. We don't want to beat you over the head with misery for an hour and a half until you don't want to listen to a podcast again for the rest of your life. So our aim will be to keep things as light and interesting as we can, but to speak from our perspectives, our limited perspectives about what's going on, and do what we can for this really messed up situation. So please do try and enjoy the podcast, guys. It will be hopefully at moments you will be able to smile. If it's too much for you, turn it off and watch some Teletubbies by all means. All right, well, with all of that out of the way, it's really a pleasure for me to introduce my guest today. Coming at me from London is Min. What's up, Min?
Hey everyone. Hi Tom. Yeah, I've been okay. So should I introduce myself?
Please, mate, go ahead.
Yeah. So my name is Min. I'm a well. I used to say I'm a filmmaker, but I don't even do that anymore. I basically work for a media company, and like I run YouTube channels for a living. But on the side, I would take like photos and stuff like that. But my main job right now is managing documentary channels on YouTube.
Cool.
Yeah.
But I mean, you've done some art, you've done some curation, you've made some visual art and stuff in the past. You're being very humble right now, but you're an artist. You're an artistic man. I've seen your
Yeah,
work.
I try to do like every random things that I can get my hand on.
Yeah, which is
Yeah,
nice for me because most people have to sort of explain how to plug in a mic and all of that. But Mim was way ahead of the game here. He's got his fluffy mic. He's got his fluffy fleece. The man's warm. He's insulated. He's got the tech.
yeah.
It's
This
good.
house is so cold, man. So we
Yeah.
got lucky and like got a really big house, but it's like old and like all the windows are like not working properly and stuff. And it's London, so just yeah,
Man, I swear so many English houses are just built in like 1645 and it's paper thin. You can hear everything that happens next door. The wind goes right through them. It's drafty. Where in London are you?
Kentish Town.
Right. So just for context, I've met you once before, right?
Yeah,
And just for a couple of beers, because so for context, I lived in Myanmar for 2.5 years. I was working for the British Council there, mostly as a teacher. I did a little bit of journalism and hung out there, and we knew some of the same people, right?
yeah.
Yeah, and
We
so
wait. Was it? Yeah, I think I know a guy who know your ex or something like that. It was like, and then like a few other people's. Yeah,
yeah, I mean the circle of like international Burmese. I don't want to say kids, international young Burmese people. Let's put it like that. Maybe with
yeah,
connections to the UK is fairly small. We're talking about like throughout the podcast, I'm going to be trying to be careful about names and like dropping people's names and stuff because I don't
yeah,
know. I don't think the Tatmadaw subscribe to the Heretics. I think I probably would have noticed that. I don't think they're
yeah,
into like indie Oxford podcast scene, but the fact is they do have like actual technology. I don't know. It's not worth taking a risk on this kind
yeah,
of thing.
yeah.
So yeah, we
So
know
we're not
people
gonna
who know
mention names.
people. We're not going to mention names exactly.
Yeah,
Maybe we'll give a shout out at the end to some people, some bands and stuff. But
yeah,
the other thing to notice is that you might say, well, why Tom haven't you got like someone from Burma who's on the front line right now and actually knows what's going on in the streets? And actually, to be honest, that was actually my original plan. I contacted, I think, 5 or 6 different people who I knew, ranging from kind of journalists to non-journalists, and at the end of the day, it is not worth their safety to come on my little show and make a permanent recording of themselves talking honestly about the situation in Burma. And politely, they all basically said that that's just not worth it. And really, that is completely within their right. So Min, like me, has the advantage of being fairly far away from this stuff. Although, Min, I don't know, man. Do you have family and stuff still in Myanmar?
basically my every like the rest of my family is still back home. So my mom and dad, my brother, my grandma, and all my cousins and shit, they're all back home. Literally,
Oh, mate.
I like feel the survivor's guilt like every day just because I'm the only person who's outside right now from my family.
Jesus Christ, dude. Okay, so all right, so before we get to that, because that's absolutely mad, let's just give a quick heads down overview of what's going on. And if you don't know what's going on, that's fine because the world's a big place and there's lots of misery in it. And if I hadn't lived there, I probably wouldn't know anything about the subject anyway, and I wouldn't care. I certainly wouldn't be doing a podcast about it. So on the 1st of February, I think is right.
Yeah,
The Burmese military government, well, the Burmese military, the Tatmadaw, staged a violent coup where they overthrew the civilian government of Myanmar and installed a state of emergency for 1 year, declaring martial law. That's
yeah,
the long and the short of it, right?
yeah,
Uh, Now this goes back to a long. If you want to depress yourself for a week, go on Wikipedia, type in Myanmar, and have a look at the political history of the country. It gets for a while. Burma was the most powerful country in Southeast Asia. I think they messed up Thailand a couple of times. They were the kings. They had the gold. They were building temples. They were absolutely smashing it with the Pagan Empire and everything. The Mongols came. Things got a bit worse. Things declined. Things were doing pretty well until yeah, boys, the Brits showed up one day in the form of our trading companies and basically, through the Anglo-Burmese Wars, turned Myanmar into a vassal state, disrespected the culture, disrespected the traditions, stomped all over the country, extracted its resources, executed people who disagreed, and then one day said, "Good luck, we're out, peace," and vanished, leaving Myanmar with a power vacuum that was filled with a proxy government that was eventually annexed into a military junta under Ne Win. Horrible, horrible, horrible years under the Burmese way of socialism. I mean, just nightmarish stuff. People, and of course, Ben, please jump in to correct me at any point in this. Yeah.
I mean, I would like to add like one information in there. So basically, so we were under like British colonization for a while, and then the father of Aung San Su Kyi, General Aung San, so he was basically just a student before, and then him and like a bunch of people went to Japan. That was around World War II, I think. I'm so bad with dates, by the way, but like from my understanding, it's like he went to Japan to learn or like start an army, and then he came back, gather the troops, and then try to fight back the British. So some argued that because of the original military training that they got was like World War II Japanese army, which is basically like fascist Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So the tactics that they use today, like going to the village, burning the village, raping people, things like that. So that was like the original kind of training they got since those days. I mean,
Wow.
That's what people say. But anyway, go on.
That's super interesting, and I think where that gets interesting is the closest thing that Myanmar has to like a hero. Because the other thing about Myanmar is that like what are there 12 distinct ethnic groups in Myanmar? You've got your
Yeah.
Kachin, your Chin, your Rohingya. It's Mon. It's a complete. It's baffling
Yeah.
to most people, you know.
There's a lot more as well, like a lot more that like fall through the crack, never like even made it on the books. And like for example, like Rohingya, it's like only then people in Burma are starting to find out about, Rohingya existed as like one of the like Burmese, like Myanmar people.
Right.
Because until like what 2-3 years ago, most people in Burma wouldn't believe the Rohingyas were part of Burma.
Right, they thought they were Bengali immigrants or whatever it was. Exactly right. And again, I mean, to add an extra layer of complexity, Myanmar is Burma in terms of the word we're using. My understanding is that we call it Burma because the British turned up, and the Burma people, which from whom Aung San Suu Kyi, the current leader, is descended. The Brits' policy of foreign expansion was to turn up somewhere, find one ethnic group that they could do business with, basically say, right, you guys are going to be the ruling caste. We'll do business with you. The rest of everyone else, you can subjugate as you wish. And so the Burmese ruling class is mostly from the Burma ethnic group. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Burma people are like, yeah, they're like the main. They're basically like the white people of.
Yeah, Myanmar. Sure. Right. So I guess to go back to where we were talking about General Aung San. So Aung San is a legend. I mean, he is revered by the Burmese people, because if you're conquered by a bunch of pasty bastards like the British, and eventually some dude comes back with military training and overthrows them and liberates the country, and I think the general consensus is that he was a decent dude by the standards of sort of like by military leaders, but he did successfully liberate and united modern Myanmar until he got
assassinated.
He got assassinated, indeed, by the. Please help me out here, man.
So basically, the story was like this: another Burmese guy called Uso wanted to overthrow him, so like they went in and assassinated the cabinet. So like they were having a meeting. They went in with like a bunch of like machine guns and just like shoot everyone. And a very interesting story is my great grandfather was in the same room when Aung San got assassinated. Because he was like one of the minister in Aung San. Like he was meant to be in like the very first government, but obviously Aung San got assassinated. He actually escaped by jumping out of the window nearby. But because he survived, he wasn't made into a martyr.
Right, martyr. Yeah. Right. So things were going all right, and then, as you say, in the Secretariat building, which is still there today, the British Colonial Building, Aung San got murdered by machine gun fire, and then things got pretty bad for a while. I think, and after that, right, was the Burmese way to socialism, and they win, and all of that stuff.
Yeah,
For my dates, right? Yeah. So lots of misery, lots of crap for a long time. You know, the Burmese people for the 20th century has spent a lot of it living under military rule and military repression of various kinds until I guess now we go to 1988, right? That's the next
yeah,
logical step, right? So Ne Win, maniac, talked to wizards, superstitious dude, did all kinds of crazy occult stuff, banned the currency and replaced it with denomination 9
yeah.
currency, like 9, 18, 27,
My
45.
dad was in final year of uni when that happened. So
Yeah.
he was a geology student. So they were like out camping, like, finding rocks and whatnot. And then they just declare like the money they had illegal. So they literally had like no money and they didn't even know
Yeah.
how to get back home.
It's insane. And so all of Myanmar's middle class who'd been saving money because no one trusted the
Mm,
banks. So people just like kept their money under their sofa cushions or under their bed, right? Just stacks
yeah.
of chat. Were told overnight that their money was no longer legal tender and they had to get some goofy ass 9 denomination chat note to spend. So they basically wiped out the Burmese middle class sort of back to square zero overnight. Oh man, I mean, really, this stuff does get heavy after a while. After a while, yeah. So anyway, so basically that went on for a while until we reached 1988, where finally we get a little bit of well, it's students, isn't it? It was 1988 is the student led
Yeah.
mostly rebellion in the history of rebellions. Where so the other thing that's amazing about Myanmar, as someone was telling me the other day, is that before a lot of this, Myanmar's reputation at its universities for stuff like agriculture and engineering was extremely high, and people from like Singapore would go to Myanmar to study at some of the academic institutions. Like, is that right?
Yeah. So Lee Kuan Yew, who is, I want to say, the father or the grandfather of the current prime minister of Singapore, he basically wrote in his like his biography that one of his regret in his life is he didn't get a chance to study in Yangon University.
Wow, wow,
So
that's
those are the days.
man.
But
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like, I guess it's a bit like Iran or somewhere which had this like incredible thriving, students and
yeah,
yeah, and
like
then
Iran in
just
the 70s
yeah,
were like really cool, right?
mini
Everyone,
skirts, smoking
yeah,
cigarettes, studying philosophy, all the things that I like, enjoy, and then back to zero, and there's a sense in which like this current situation, which we'll come to in a second, is like extra tragic because there's just this generation of kids who've had Pepsi and KFC and mobile games and like a
Spotify,
Korean
Netflix,
television, and they're being taken back to like the 1970s. Anyway, we'll come to that in a second. So let's try and finish our slightly basic historiography. So 1988 comes, students
yeah,
rise up. They are crushed with absolutely horrific force. I think it's like 5,000 or 15,000 or something. A bunch of them just
yeah.
get machine gunned to death. But there's enough pressure to force the military to hold democratic elections. Is that roughly right?
And sorry, I wanted to add this
Yeah,
because
please.
Naywin famously said this on like an official TV announcement when the students were like, protesting and like going violent and shit. So basically, he said that um, there's no point shooting guns in the air. When we shoot, we're gonna shoot straight at you.
Yeah,
He like
yeah.
said it on the telly. It's like crazy. But yeah. So what was your question
No, no,
again?
that's fine. I mean, it's a good point because actually it's echoed in the current situation because I've seen TikToks and Vines of like Burmese cops, fucking Burmese pigs, like with live weapons being like, this is a real gun. This isn't like a rubber bullet gun. If I shoot
Yeah,
you, I'm going to shoot you in the head. Like the crazy thing about social media is that you can just see like these psychopathic people announcing their intent to murder children for on on social media.
yeah. That
It's
is so
absolutely insane.
surreal.
It
When
is.
I saw those TikTok videos, as well, it's just so surreal. Like,
Yeah. It's a lack of self-awareness and an awareness that there'll be no consequence for their stupidity. I mean, like we can talk about police in general. I mean, you just need a certain percentage of psychopaths in any given police force for it to end up it being being dominated by a psychopathic mentality, which is I think is what's happening. So anyway, let's desperately try and finish this. So 1988 comes, it's brutally put down, but
yeah,
there's enough pressure that comes from this horrific, I mean, people are just like, there's just bodies piled up in the streets, and so the military basically says, okay, fine, we'll have some democratic elections. And here, I guess, is where we should probably mention the person who, if you know anything about Burmese politics, you will be familiar with, which is Daw Aung San Su Kyi. Daw is honorific. It means like auntie or our lady or something like that. And she is the daughter of the guy we just mentioned, General Aung San. Is that correct, Min?
Yep.
Yeah. So maybe could you explain, like, to the Burmese people what she represents and why she's occupied this incredible place in the nation's consciousness?
So her story is interesting because when Aung San got assassinated, she moved to England, and she actually, had a pretty British life up until when she's like, I don't remember how old she was, but she basically got a husband and 2 kids at that point. And her mom died, and she went back for her mom's funeral, and then she saw the situation of the country, and she decided to basically stay. And
Right.
yeah, she basically left her entire family and 2 kids, to fight for a bunch of Burmese people that she never met before.
And initially, she's a huge threat to the Tatmadaw. When we say the Tatmadaw, we mean the Burmese military. Basically, it's the same thing. Now, because she's the daughter of the country's unifying hero, and because she's foreign educated, and because, well, she's charismatic, and the question of her like moral character is beyond me for sure. It's a complicated issue, and I don't want to get too into the weeds here. She was an absolute liberal darling of the Western media for a while. My RE teacher had a poster of her on her wall, and a lot of institutions really held her up as a hero. The Rohingya question made all this a lot more complicated, but we're getting ahead of ourselves once again. So she is a huge threat to them because she's someone who can lead the Burmese people and will unite the Burmese people because people respect her.
And because of her father's name and like how much Burmese people have this idealization of, a person thing, and that's been deeply embedded into Burmese people's mind since the kings and queens. We always like to sort of have one person to look up to and basically believe that person is God and will do everything for us, which is probably not a good thing.
No, but I think it's not just Burmese people who like to believe that one person will save them. After getting such a shitty hand of awful people for so long, I think we can all agree that she is a much better option than all the kind of psychopathic generals and creepy weirdos that otherwise have dominated Burmese politics. So the military eventually agrees to hold elections where the military have their political party, which is can you remind me of what it's called? I don't know, the Strength and Unity bunch of assholes party, or
I just know them as USDP, but I don't even know what it stands for. We call it the Green Party. That's the easiest.
Right. It's like Development and Prosperity or some Development and Progress. Whatever, dude. It's like, do you want to vote for the military dictatorship? And then there's the NLD, which is the National League for Democracy, which is Aung San Suu Kyi's party, which basically says, democratic reform, softening of the military constitution, investing some money in education and healthcare and blah 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 and all that sort of stuff. So my understanding is the first election, the military basically stole it. They basically just completely, people were terrified to vote. The UN were like, this is a joke. This is not a proper election. And it just not much happened. But it was an election. So that was some progress. And then, so just before I moved to Myanmar, there was the second election, which was, I think, UN moderated and more closely controlled. And in this election, the NLD did extremely well, 70, 80.
In the 88 election, they won, but basically Ne Win wasn't too happy with it. And then obviously the whole uprising happened, and then she went into house arrest for, I want to say, 15 years, 20 years, a long, long time.
Yeah. That's an important part of the story. She was under house arrest for a long time.
Because during the house arrest, the military government called themselves as we're just gonna basically keep control of the country until we can practice proper democracy, according to them. So while she was under house arrest, they wrote the constitution, which is basically which became the problem of this coup.
Right.
Basically, the coup happened because of the constitution.
That's interesting. So I don't. So from what So the first interesting thing about the constitution is that you need I think you need something like 76% of the people in the parliament to vote to change the constitution, but
Yeah,
25% of all of the seats of the parliament are permanently held by the military. So it's
yeah,
like if me, Min, and one other guy got together and we made the rule that we can just beat him up and take his money, but you need to have a vote of 3 people to change the rule, right? So
yeah,
he's screwed. There's nothing he can do. We have the majority, and so the military have made it so that they cannot the constitution can't be changed. And this is where we start getting into the thorny stuff of the modern day of people saying why is Aung San Suu Kyi defending the military? And so I think so. Okay, the NLD win a landslide election. They become the leader. She becomes the, what's her title? The
the
chancellor,
counselor, chancellor.
state
Yeah,
councillor. That sounds good. Yeah, it's got like
yeah,
a
because
Star Wars
she
music.
can't
Yeah.
even be a president because they wrote it in the constitution that if you married a foreigner, you can't be a president.
That's yes, indeed. It's quite funny. Yeah. And then but she can, but there is a president, and now we're getting into like Burmese political theory. My understanding is that they underestimated her power, and that her power to choose that president, because through the will of the people, has grown over time, and they underestimated how able she would be to make sure that the person who sits in the president's chair is team NLD and not
Yeah,
Team Tatmadaw, right?
yeah, yeah.
Right. So, okay. So the NLD is in power. Myanmar is still one of the 20 poorest countries in the world. This is when I get here.
What
Okay.
year was it?
I got there in 2018. 2018, I think, is when I got there. There was a mood just before. So about 2 years before I was there, a year before I was there was a mood, especially in expats, foreigners, white people, immigrants, whatever you want to call us, who came there, that Myanmar was about to become something like the next Thailand, the next Philippines. Like this was going to be the hipster frontier of Southeast Asia, an unspoiled, beautiful place where freedom was about to ring out from the rooftops,
Right.
and people wanted to be on the edge of history. And I knew a lot of journalists who moved there at the time because they wanted to document, you know, well, you know, so shortly after this euphoria, the Rohingya crisis happened. Now, people who don't know anything about Burma will know about the Rohingya. If you know one word about Myanmar, it's
We
probably Rohingya.
we we forgot to mention one uprising, which is the one
Yes, we did.
I experienced
The
in
saffron.
2008, the saffron one, because
Please.
I left after that. I left in 2009.
Okay, Min, take the stage, mate.
I was only year 8 when that happened. But I mean, it wasn't like a big one compared to like 88 or what's happening now. But that was the one where basically Buddhist monks came out and protest because the country is just going to shit, and then they just kill monks and like beat them up on the street, and they like did pretty fucked up stuff because Myanmar is like a majority Buddhist country. So when they see monks getting beat up on the street, that just scared everyone into like doing anything more.
Yeah, I mean the role of the monks in the whole thing has been really interesting for me as well, because you have, I mean, for God's sake, it's Buddhism. Like it's it is fundamentally a peaceful. It goes without saying that it's a peaceful religion, But if you look at how Zen Buddhism was used in World War II by Japanese militarists, and how Theravada
Yeah,
Buddhism has been, there are monks in the current climate who are basically saying, shoot in the head,
yeah,
kill dissenters. It is beggars belief, and of course it was
weird too. Yeah,
right, who was one of the chief rabble rousers
yeah,
around the Rohingya thing, who was a Buddhist monk who basically said, I mean, I'm sure I'm misquoting him a bit, but not much. He's like, yeah, they're Muslims, they're dogs. Let's make sure they're all dead,
yeah.
but
Buddhist
Myanmar for the
extremists.
Buddhist extremists, which is
Yeah,
so counterintuitive to the Western mind, but it shouldn't be if you think about like the Crusades and all the stuff we did in the name of Christianity. But and also the Tatmadaw have exerted some control over the monks as well, I think, through various means as well. And not all monks are good people. Surprise, surprise. Many are. It's complicated, right?
yeah. Some argue that. So I think there's a whole thing about Burmese people have this like, I don't even want to say Islamophobia, because they just kind of like equally fear all brown people in a way. It's like colorism
Mm,
almost. And I
mm.
think it comes from like, it's like a effect of colonization, because when,
Right.
you know, British colonized Burma, a lot of, because it wasn't British Empire, it was British India who colonized Burma.
Hmm.
So a lot of like Indian Pakistani like moved to Burma, and then, there's a whole divide segregation between like Burmese people, white people, and then Indians. So it's
Color.
like, yeah,
Right.
the color,
The
yeah. So that,
color. It's one of the genius things that the British Empire learned through that empire was that when people get angry, which they will at being colonized, they don't want to look for a guy like me to
yeah,
beat with sticks. That's not what we want. So we ship colored brown people in from India, give them the sticks, pay them, a little bit, and say, "Welcome to the front line of administration,"
yeah,
diffusing the racist hatred away from people who look like me and onto people who are browner than the people in that district. Which to this day, I mean, when I was a teacher, my students would, now it's like quite lighthearted because I remember them. They call this like kid like kala, which is
yeah.
color, which is a slur. It's very hard for me to tell how bad that slur is and I was like, you can't stop calling him that. And the kid was like, it's
It's
okay,
it's
teacher. I
like
am color.
it's
I am
like
color. Like I'm
it's
like, no,
almost
no.
like N word,
Right,
but
right, right. But
it's just so okay for people to say it there.
they had no problem, and the kid didn't seem to mind very much. He was like, "It's true, teacher. Like, I am color. Like, everyone says this about me." And I'm like, "But that's not okay. Like, I have such a Western liberal, like, oh, So it is still a slur, and it's still used in discrimination. And of course, because many Rohingya are Bengali, they often do tend to be darker than the Burma natives, who are quite pale skinned. So
Yeah,
there's as anything with race, there's all kinds of stuff going on. Because if you look at people like Aung San Su Kyi, like, she looks like, I mean, she just looks like fundamentally she's quite light skinned as well, right?
she is, yeah.
It's there is a real hierarchy of skin tone that's tied into this whole thing, and the British exploited that, as you say. So okay, so we've basically come through the Saffron Revolution, which was a
Yeah.
really good point to remind me of, and we've come all the way through to the Rohingya. So what happened there? Basically, I mean, God, this is extremely difficult for me to discuss. Min, do you want to take the first swing at this one?
Uh, so so the Rohingya crisis is a genocide. I'll call it genocide. It's
uh,
fine. Yeah. So that's been happening since like way before people start caring or knowing about it. You know, my uncle, my late uncle, is dead now. So he used to work for immigration in Rakhine, and this guy who is like a nice Buddhist guy, like otherwise, and this is something that I like noticed with a lot of Burmese, the happy smiling faces, golden land Burmese people, is that when it comes to like, you know, talking about like getting rid of people who don't belong like who they think don't belong in the country, it's like
yeah.
so casual. So my uncle worked in immigration in Rakhine, and he used to basically tell a story about how they just, so like whenever people try to come into Rakhine, they just like put like bags over their head, like kick them in the water.
Okay, sounds like a good immigration policy.
Because it's
Oh
like no
God.
one is like documented, and like no one cares if someone just like disappear, and that's how they used to do it. And like I think I don't even know what year is like the thing that we know now. I don't even remember which year it started, but it started because they said that a Burmese woman got raped by a Rohingya person,
Yeah.
and then that started the riots and like burning the bridge villages and etc. And like the military went in and like, you know did like a lot of damage to the Rohingya families, and not only Rohingya actually, because in the Rakhine border, there's a lot of races. There's Rakhine, there's like few other ethnic groups, also Hindu people, Muslim people, yeah, and they get attacked too. They didn't like. I don't think the soldiers could tell the difference between like Hindus and Rohingyas. To be
No, they
honest.
probably weren't trained in
Yeah.
discriminating religious orientation. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. So I mean, you've summed it up. So the counterpoint to all of this is that there is something called the Arakan Resistance Army, which is
Yeah.
basically is an Islamic militant fundamentalist organization fighting against the Burmese authorities. Now, whether, as with any conflict, who's the freedom fighters and who's the terrorists is basically up to you, the listener, to make up your own mind about. And we're certainly not here to tell you. But
Yeah.
the Google Maps provides you with the evidence that you need to see that the Tatmadaw razed a bunch of villages to the ground. And I think that there's enough accounts of rape, murder, torture, genocide, etc., to basically agree. Under the UN definition of genocide is something like the deliberate attempt to exterminate a racial group of people by, you know, a deliberate attempt to wipe their culture and their people from the face of the planet. And so it does fall under UN categorization of genocide. Now, the thing about the Rohingya thing that maybe gives it a little bit of nuance is that the Tatmadaw have been fighting fighting direct wars against ethnic resistance groups in Myanmar, like forever. That's just what they do.
Yeah.
So
We have the longest civil war in the world.
nice.
Pretty much.
Congratulations. Well done, mate. Yeah, I mean, I know that there's the Kachin, there's there's like a Shan resist. I mean, there's
Shan, Kering, KNU, KIA, AA. Those are all like the name of rebel groups.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
organizations.
a lot of this, whether this gets interesting for me, and I know a little bit about this because I wrote a little bit about it and went to Shan specifically. I went to the poppy fields in Shan, which is where they grow the poppies, and the poppies are used to make opium, and the opium is turned into heroin, and the heroin is sold to China, to various other countries. Methamphetamine is also produced in the dark northern hinterlands of Myanmar in these terrifying factories, and is then also sold across the border to China, to Korea, to places like this. The estimated GDP of all this stuff is like, I think it's like $11 to $12 billion a year, and this is black money. Like if you go on Wikipedia, Myanmar, it's like legumes, jade, delicious beans. Like it doesn't account for the insane amount of black money, and a lot of this warfare, I think, is fighting for control of these drug resources. Is that broadly correct?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah.
I read a book called Shadowlands by this author. I would recommend it. Maybe I'll put a link in the bio about the Golden Triangle area, and these they're run by like local warlords who do business with the juntas. And
I heard stories about how people selling drugs like candies on the street.
Apparently, there's one village you can go to. I mean, this is really completely apocryphal, where like the drug trade occurs, and there's just like bales of heroin, bales of, you can just go and ask for anything. And now I'm getting into speculation, and I maybe be careful, but there are, I think, some border towns close to the Chinese border as well, where like gambling and prostitution and drug use is completely unlicensed, and people come from China, often China, maybe some other places as well. And my impression is you turn up at the hotel and you go, I would like, a bunch of methamphetamine, a bunch of ketamine. I'd like some girls, and I want to play some blackjack. And they're like, welcome to the hotel, mate. That'll be $250,
Yeah. Some of the border towns look more fancy than like the cities in the mainland.
Right.
But you go there and you see even the road signs are in Chinese.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the Chinese influence on Myanmar is again another thorny topic. So let's try and push ahead to the end of the chronology, and then we can sort of take a step back. So we've covered the Saffron Revolution. We're up to kind of the modern day. So we're now the Rohingya thing happens, and hugely stains Myanmar's reputation internationally because people conflate the Tatmadaw, the military, with the government a lot of the time. So people say the Burmese government is murdering and raping Muslims. We thought Aung San Su Kyi was a great darling of the liberal left. Now we have to take down all our posters of her. And what they're failing to account for is the difference between her, I don't want to say puppet government, but her government and the Tatmadaw military. Is that vaguely right, Min?
Yeah. So, on the surface, it looked like our government is in control of everything, but with when it comes to military decisions, NLD government can't say shit
Right.
to them, you know.
Right.
And not only that, like what makes it weird is like, so when the stuff happening at Rakhine, it was NLD government who kind of signed off on the killings as well. But like, I don't know whether if it's like a military sort of trying to, make it look like that, or like whether she actually did it. But the fact that she went to ICJ to go on like International Criminal Court of Justice, go on the court and said that, oh, it's not a genocide, I think that basically ruined her reputation.
That's exactly right. She took this weird decision to fly out by herself
I
and
was there.
defend.
I was in The Hague.
Really?
Yeah,
Holy
yeah,
shit. Yeah.
because I don't know. I just wanted to see what it's like, and I remember I stayed at this family who now reside in Amstelveen, in Netherlands. So that family used to be rebels. So in '88, a lot of students went to the borders and become rebels. So they were one of those family, managed to immigrate all the way to Netherlands, and I was staying at theirs, but I didn't even know them before. I just like found them on like Facebook and stuff, and they're really nice people. But when it comes to Rohingya, they'll be like, yeah, kill them all.
Fucking hell.
But I went to both sides to like talk to them. I went to the Rohingya group who were like protesting, and then I went to the Burmese group, and then there's like the Chin and like Shan and like that kind of like ethnic groups who are kind of on the Rohingya side just because they
Yeah.
hate the Burma
Right.
people. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is why I mean, again, us trying to put a bow on this whole thing in an hour. I think we've got an admirable goal, but this is Pandora's box, everybody. And this is
yeah.
the lesson that the British Empire learned: is like, you can't just show up in a country with a ruler, draw a bunch of lines around it, and be like, "Congratulations, you're a country." Like, people are really complicated, and you are just, it's so, this whole issue is fractal. The more you look into it, the more complicated it gets. And
Yeah.
I will not say it again, but again, I apologize for our, like, my especially fragile basic interpretation of all this stuff, but it's leading us towards what I hope is a useful goal, which is just setting the stage for the current what's happening right now. So
Yeah.
that's I think let's put a line under the Rohingya thing for now. We're not really
Yeah.
here to talk about that, but
Yeah.
it is important because it sours international approval of Aung San Suu Kyi's
Oh,
NLD.
another important thing to mention is, so Aung San, the father of Aung San Suu Kyi, actually promised, and they actually signed like an agreement called Pinlong Agreement, which is to give federal state government once he's in power, but he got killed. So that never
Right.
was achieved. And that was the federal government dream. It's been like there since that day. And only now, because of the whole coup, everyone is agreeing with it. Because the whole
Okay.
time, the Burma, the majority ethnic group, Burma group, never really was cool with the federal state government, because obviously they in power,
Mm.
But only
Mm-hmm.
now when the coup happened, and while all this is happening, now people are starting to see that federal state government is probably the way to go.
Right. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Okay. Cool. Again, good stuff. I mean, I'm not. Yeah, politically, it all gets a bit complicated. So I arrive in Myanmar. The mood is still euphoric from the NLD victories. There is NLD graffiti everywhere. People are optimistic about the future. People
Yeah.
are a bit confused as to why Westerners have suddenly started telling them that they're bad people because a bunch of Rohingya have died, but are generally positive about the future, and the mood is very strong. In the time I was there was no, I mean, it's like, I don't know. I mean, a lot of the people I knew were various white foreigners working with, the UN and
Yeah.
DFID and various international development organizations. And I don't think anyone was naive about how easy the process was going to be of like transforming Myanmar into Thailand in 15 years, but there was a mood of kind of quiet, optimistic, things are getting better rather than getting worse. Yeah, I mean, mostly obviously the advantage of being a teacher is I got to hang out with Burmese young people and old people every day for about 6 hours for about 2 years. And obviously I'm not going to open up a lesson with like, so Rohingya, good or bad, you know. But it did give me a bit of an insight onto what like your average dude, well, not average because obviously the people I was teaching were closer to the kind of upper middle class, but a bit of a sense of what was going on. And the mood was certainly one of like a positive forward motion. So let's come to the present day. Thank God we're 41 minutes in. So my understanding of what happened is this. So in there is a statute in the Burmese law that means that any military person has to retire from the military once they hit the age of 65. Now,
Yeah.
what's his name?
Miao
The
Lai.
Yeah, thank you. I won't say it. Just every time I'll just ask Min to say it. He is the manlet ruler of the Tatmadaw. He is a diminutive frog-like man bedecked in medals, who is currently the chief dickhead of the Tatmadaw, and he is due for retirement in July of this year. He would have been formally asked to retire, and I believe, which means that then a replacement could be nominated by Aung San Su Kyi. Is that correct, Min?
I'm not sure about the next person being nominated by Aung San Suu Kyi, but the fact that he will have to retire in July, that is true. And the story that is out there right now is like basically he went to Aung San Suu Kyi and asked if she can make him like, you know, extend the thing or like make him into president or whatever. She said no, and then that's why the coup happened.
Interesting. So we come to the coup now. So let's just tell the story of the coup quickly. So on February the 1st, while the world is worrying about its coronavirus, this and that, we had one of the most Zizekian, like sorcery of the spectacle scenes, I think, in modern history, which is a Burmese TikTok fitness dancer doing some kind of Zumba routine in front of the state buildings was it Mandalay or was it Yangon? In Naypyidaw.
Yeah.
Naypyidaw is its own fascinating topic. We'll leave it for now. It's super interesting. It's this ghost city they built in the jungle. I went there. It's like Pyongyang. It's so weird. Anyway, Myanmar. So Yangon is not technically the capital. The capital is Naypyidaw, the seat of kings. This like creepy city they built in the middle of nowhere. Anyway, she's doing some wacky Zumba fitness dance to music. And as she's doing the dance live streamed, you see a bunch of like armored vehicles and lorries roll in the background. And what that is, ladies and gentlemen, is footage of the military coup happening before our eyes in the context of a TikTok fitness video. So on February the 1st, the Tatmadaw annexed, I guess, the government, declared a state of national emergency lasting 1 year, and proclaimed themselves the caretakers of the country and in charge. Is that right, Min?
Yeah, pretty much. So I think according to the constitution, I mean, there's loads of like variation of the story, but according to the constitution, if the president, so basically they accuse NLD of like vote fraud.
Yeah, right.
Fraud, yeah.
It's actually very funny. If I can drop in for a second here, one of the funny things about it is that the law they used to convict Aung San Suu Kyi of were remnants of the British colonial law that was still hanging around. There's some law of like causing a dissent and uprising or whatever, and because she had some walkie-talkies or something, they basically they got her with like British colonial law, which is still being used. It's very funny. Anyway, sorry, please continue.
Yeah, like so they did that to her, but like in order to make them sound legit, it's like they had to make the vice president gave Miao Line power, and then Miao Line can then say, "Well, I'm taking over for 1 year." But whatever they did, according to them, it's like, well, we did it according to the constitution, so it's legit. But it's the constitution they wrote, which is why I think the West got confused in the very beginning because you know, from their point of view in the beginning, it's like it's all according to the constitution.
Right.
You know, vote fraud happened. Military have this power, so they can do that.
I think so. But what we should say clearly is this is terrible. This is a bad thing.
Yeah.
This is a military dictatorship seizing power for awful reasons, and it is nothing but bad for everybody in Myanmar except for about 9 people. That is the truth, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. What I'm going to suggest then is we take a quick break, have a glass of water, and then we come back. And then for the second part of the show, we'll talk about the current situation and go on from there. And thank you very much. If you've made it this far through the history of Burma as told by, a couple of people, thank you very much. And we'll be back with you soon for more Heretics. Yeah. Just a quick note to say, this is the end of part 1. I talk about taking a break. The break is more of a gap for you guys. We'll be back very soon with part 2. So, do your thing. Part 2 will be coming live soon. This is the end of part 1. I hope you enjoyed it. More to come about Burma and more very soon. That's it for me. Okay. Chat soon. Bye.